Welcome everyone. Today we are covering Chapter 4, Process Costing. In Chapter 3 we learned job order costing, which is used when companies produce customized products or unique jobs. In this chapter we shift to process costing, which is used when companies produce large volumes of identical or homogeneous products. This is very common in industries like food processing, chemical manufacturing, and oil refining. Our goal today is to understand how process costing works, how we compute equivalent units of production, and how we assign costs to units. Before we get into process costing, let's connect it to real life. Canning food is a preservation method that involves sealing food in jars or cans and heating them to destroy microorganisms that cause spoilage. When people can food, they often date the jars. Dating jars is a simple type of accounting practice because it helps track batches. If one goes bad, the date allows you to identify which jar belongs to which batch. Without dating, it would be impossible to troubleshoot problems. Now let's begin with our first learning activity. You will match the descriptions with the following terms: direct materials, direct labor, overhead costs, and job order costing. Direct labor is a labor directly tied to production. Direct materials are materials traced to the product. Overhead is indirect production costs like utilities and rent. Job order costing is a costing system used for unique jobs. Pause here and work through the activity. Once you've finished, check your answer with the solution provided in the back of Chapter 4. Now let's review the learning objectives for Chapter 4. By the end of this chapter, you should be able to describe how a firm uses process costing to identify the equivalent units of production. Explain how a firm computes equivalent units of production. Explain how a firm computes the cost per equivalent units of production. Identify how a firm assigns costs to units in a process costing system, and record the journal entries associated with process costing. Now let's define process costing. Process costing is a costing system that averages total production costs across all units produced. It is used by businesses that produce large volumes of homogeneous products, meaning products that are essentially identical. Examples include food processors and oil refineries. Instead of tracking costs by job, process costing tracks costs by department or production process. You might note in your active learning notes that process costing averages production costs across all units produced and is used for homogeneous products. Now let's apply the concept. This activity asks you to select the businesses most likely to use process costing. Remember, process costing is used for mass production of identical products. Pause here and work through the activity. Once you've finished, check your answer with the solution provided in the back of Chapter 4. Now we introduce one of the key reports used in process costing, the production cost report. A production cost report summarizes the flow of physical goods through production, the output in terms of equivalent units of production, the cost per equivalent units of production, and the assignment of costs to completed units and work in process inventory. This report is the core tool used to compute unit costs in a process costing system. This slide shows a physical flow of units example and identifies three critical elements of inventory in a process costing system. Units that were in beginning work in process that would be completed during the current period, units that are started and completed during the current period, and units that remain in ending inventory at the end of the period. In this example, Mott's Dairy begins with 2,000 gallons in work in process at the start of July. They start 50,000 gallons during July. They end with 1,500 gallons still in work in process at the end of the month. So total gallons to account for includes the units that were in beginning work in process and the units they started. That amounts to 52,000 units. We set up the equation beginning work in process plus units that are started and completed minus ending work in process equals units to account for, or 52,000. Solving for X gives us 48,500 gallons started and completed. Now let's do the physical flow activity for berry frozen foods. You are given beginning work in process, units started during July, and ending work in process. Your job is to compute total units to account for and then break them into beginning work in process, started and completed, and ending work in process. Pause here and work through the activity. Once you've finished, check your answer with the solution provided in the back of Chapter 4.